In the previous episode, Ellie playfully teased Damien by suggesting a sibling-like connection, running her hand through his hair. Damien, uncomfortable with the idea, clarified he wasn't her sibling due to the age difference. Ellie, realizing Damien's maturity, reconsidered treating him like a child and lightened the mood by joking about the sibling comment. Despite this, she sincerely expressed finding comfort in sleeping next to him. Damien, blushing, shyly agreed, and Ellie, finding him adorable, patted him before they both drifted into sleep. In Ellie's dream, they wore flower crowns, creating a joyful moment where Damien expressed gratitude for the happiness Ellie brought into his life. Now let's see what unfolds next. The next morning, Ellie noticed Damien seemed to be having pleasant dreams. Concerned, she questioned his well-being, suspecting illness due to his feverish state. Damien denied being sick, but Ellie, skeptical, pointed out his revealing voice. Pressing for honesty, she discovered he had felt unwell since the previous night. Ellie, frustrated, wondered why he hadn't informed her sooner, regretting her obliviousness to his illness while enjoying a peaceful night's sleep. Ellie urgently inquires about Damien's temperature, learning from Tommy that he has a high fever and should rest for a few days. She instructs Damien to follow the advice. Tommy, surprised at Damien's normal speech despite the fever, silently contemplates the situation. Damien, concerned for Ellie, asks about her well-being. Despite her commitment to work, Damien is shocked as he realizes Ellie might leave him again. Ellie assures Damien that she'll return quickly, promising to make soup and advising him to close his eyes and count to 100. Damien requests her speedy return, to which Ellie agrees and affectionately calls him a good boy. As she leaves, she assigns Tommy to watch over Damien, who receives a glare from Damien. Nervously, Tommy reflects, this kid really is a wily one. Ellie, working in the director's office, contemplates the difficulty of taking medicine while the director is present, realizing the director shows no sign of leaving and is in a bad mood. The director angrily shouts at Ellie to clean faster, prompting a frightened response. Ellie, anxious about potential repercussions, decides to start cleaning the outside first to avoid making any mistakes. The director expresses frustration over the orphanage's financial struggles despite having many children. Contemplating drastic measures, she considers selling a mana stone to alleviate the debt. Mana stones, composed of condensed mana, enable individuals without inherent mana to use magic. Due to their rarity and the need for a mage's assistance in their creation, mana stones command high prices in the market. The director tightly holds an orange mana stone, expressing reluctance to sell them due to the difficulty in obtaining these precious stones. Frustrated, she glares at Ellie, contemplating the idea of fetching a high price for Ellie if she wasn't the daughter of a thief, using the money to settle her debts. Malene enters and confirms the director's predictions, explaining that due to Duke Schuttz's actions, the interest of nobles in adopting orphans has significantly decreased. The director expresses concern, revealing that fewer nobles are adopting children because they fear the Duke confronting them during his visits to those who have adopted. The director wears a mischievous smile as she confirms with Malene, who acknowledges spreading the word about the presence of the late Duke Clyder's son. Pleased, the director appreciates Malene's efforts, acknowledging her good work. Malene expresses fear about the potential consequences if someone discovers the lie about the Duke Clyder's son. The director dismisses such concerns, stating that Duke Schutz has never seen the child in person and won't be able to tell the difference between a real and a fake. Ellie silently listens to their conversation, overhearing all their discussions. Ellie anticipating Duke Schutz's arrival to potentially rescue Damien. Duke Schutz confronts Damien's master, disdainfully remarking on the ineffective attempt to bring him down with mere herbs. A frightened man pleads for forgiveness, acknowledging their unforgivable sin. A scared girl joins in, begging for mercy, claiming they had no idea he was Duke Schutz and swearing ignorance. With a sigh, Anne urges Duke to listen to their pleas, reminding him that he didn't come to slaughter them. Duke, however, sees their actions as a sin worthy of death and expresses reluctance to let it go easily. He demands information about the child. Trembling with fear, the girl confesses she had no idea the slave was truly the son of Duke Clyder. She reveals that the child is at an orphanage, one run by her friend. Justifying her actions, she thought it would be better for a child of his age to be in an orphanage than in a rough environment like where they were. Raising his sword, Duke threatens to kill them, and the frightened Duke screams in terror. Anne intervenes, expressing doubt about their complete dishonesty, mentioning a letter he received a few days ago. He hands the letter to Duke, stating that it claims the child they are searching for is at the Singh orphanage, not far from their current location. Duke expresses frustration at only learning about the orphanage now, having already searched every orphanage in the Empire. Anne explains that the Singh orphanage is not what it seems, being a place that exploits orphans for profit. Duke, angered, expresses the desire to kill Anne immediately. Anne apologizes for the delayed revelation. Duke questions the frightened man about sending the child to the Singh orphanage, and he admits to it. Duke, deciding on punishment later, instructs Ant to send a letter to the orphanage, notifying them of their imminent visit. Ant acknowledges the order. Duke interrupts, realizing they need to address the frightened Yu first. The scared girl pleads with Duke, but he doesn't wait, and she cries out in fear. The director expresses frustration at having to deal with sick children who thought they'd be fine after soaking in a freezing lake. She criticizes them as nitwits. Contemplating Duke Schutz's impending arrival, she decides to give the children cheap medicine to make them look healthy enough to show to the Duke. However, this plan requires her to sell one of her precious mana stones. Opening her mana stone cabinet, the director discovers that one of the orange mana stones is missing. Trembling with fear, she exclaims, "What happened? It can't be." Ellie, by Damien's side, observes his high fever. Despite giving him a warm face cloth, she decides to soak it in cold water. Damien, unwell, expresses reluctance to be alone. Ellie acknowledges his condition but notes his apparent sleepiness, giving her a chance to sneak away for a moment. Holding Damien's hand, she sits by him, contemplating the situation. Ellie, holding the same orange mana stone, reflects on her actions, thinking that Damien seemed to improve a bit due to the stolen mana stone's warmth. However, she didn't realize the severity of his fever. Acknowledging Carson's illness, she emphasizes Damien's weaker condition from the beginning. She adds a dismissive note about not caring about Carson's well-being. Ellie gently places her hand on Damien's forehead. As Damien murmurs in his slumber, appreciating the comforting touch, Ellie thinks about how no one should hurt such a sweet, innocent child. Overwhelmed by Damien's adorable nature, she can't contain her feelings. Discovering Damien asleep, Ellie hurries out of the room, planning to find something light for him to eat. Suddenly, the director confronts her, questioning her actions and causing Ellie to jolt. Ellie, nervous, wonders why the director is present. Ellie, wearing a smile, mentions taking care of Damien due to his illness and going to get more warm water. The director notices and retrieves the orange mana stone from Ellie's pocket, questioning if she intended it for Damien as well. Ellie is startled, realizing the director noticed the missing stone. Despite the shock, Ellie attempts to deny involvement, attributing it to Carson. However, the director, angered, compares Ellie to her mother, causing Ellie to jolt in response. Angry, Ellie questions the relevance of her mother in the situation. The director, poking Ellie, expresses disappointment, stating she had gone easy on her, thinking she was trying to keep a low profile. She feels repaid with theft and decides to correct Ellie's perceived bad habit. As the director prepares to slap Ellie forcefully, Damien intervenes, taking the slap intended for Ellie, warning her not to touch Ellie. Damien expresses anger, threatening consequences if Ellie is harmed. The flustered director questions Damien's interference. Remembering Damien's tendency to hold grudges, she informs the director that he might attack indiscriminately when upset. The director, annoyed, faces Maline's entrance, who delivers the news that Duke Schutz will be visiting the orphanage shortly, surprising the director. She commands immediate cleaning and instructs the children to change into nicer clothes. She specifically requests all children with black hair and blue eyes to be brought to her office. Maline acknowledges and agrees to carry out the orders. The director, frustrated, expresses her unreadiness and postpones dealing with Ellie and Damien. Damien glares at the director in anger. Ellie observes the director leaving and catches her clothing, asking about Damien. The director, indifferent, questions Ellie about Damien's relevance, to which Ellie points out Damien's black hair and blue eyes. The director rejects the idea of showing Damien to Duke Schutz in his current state, considering it a disgrace. Damien begins to wobble, and Ellie expresses concern. However, Damien stumbles and falls. Shocked, Ellie exclaims Damien's name and to support him. The director smirks upon witnessing Damien's fall. Ellie, concerned, checks on Damien, asking if he got hurt. The director, indifferent, remarks that a sick child like Damien needs rest. She leaves and the unconscious Damien mumbles Ellie's name. Ellie comforts him with a pat, promising to ensure he is reunited with his family. All the teachers bow to Duke, welcoming him. Duke, pondering the isolated location of the orphanage, acknowledges its distance from the city and the necessity of horses and a carriage to reach it. Despite the potential claim of a good environment for children, Duke wonders about the director's absence and expects a response to his letter by now. A teacher hesitates, explaining that they received news of Duke's visit not long ago and were slightly late in informing the director, who is on her way. Duke inquires about the child, and the teacher, contemplating, reveals that the director swore them to secrecy, preventing them from telling the truth. Duke, frustrated, considers the situation a mess and decides to find the child himself. The teachers gasp in response. Duke enters the orphanage, noting the cold environment and expressing concern for young children. Ant agrees with Duke's observation. Duke instructs Ant to dispose of them promptly if they lied about the Kleider child. Ant acknowledges the command. While on his way, Duke halts as Ellie falls in his path. Ellie expresses pain, and Duke, observing her, initially considers her a child. He approaches Ellie, apologizes, and asks if she can stand. Ellie thanks him, and Duke, surprised by her bright green eyes, Duke helps Ellie stand, and she asks him who he is. Anne is shocked by Ellie's reference to Duke as Mr. and realizes she doesn't know who his Grace is. Attempting an explanation, Anne is interrupted as Ellie assumes they might be there to adopt a child. Duke confirms this, and Ellie, pleased, directs them to the director's room where the children are. Ellie informs Duke that the children with black hair and blue eyes are in the director's room. Duke acknowledges that's likely where the director is too. Anne suggests the director was hiding to buy time and questions Duke about her intentions. Duke, muttering, expresses uncertainty but admits it has put him in a foul mood. Duke thanks Ellie for the information, and Ellie, bowing, tells them not to mention it and bids them goodbye. Duke suggests they should get going, and Anne acknowledges. Anne reflects on Ellie, considering her an odd child. He notes that she is the first person to face his Grace without crying. Anne corrects himself, remembering someone else from a long time ago who didn't even blink when looking at his Grace. The director welcomes Duke and expresses gratitude for visiting the orphanage. However, the children appear frightened upon seeing Duke. Duke inquires if these are the children, and the kids start crying. The director hesitates but affirms that these are all the children with black hair and blue eyes, suggesting that the child Duke is searching for might be among them. The director, nervous, observes the crying children, expressing surprise as they don't usually cry like this. Meanwhile, Duke takes out a stone, contemplating that Duke Clyder infused his son's mana into it, expecting a reaction when the child is near. However, upon looking at the stone, Duke realizes that this isn't the right place. The director asks Duke for his opinion, and he responds by stating he believes she was lying. Duke orders Anne to kill her, and Anne acknowledges the command. The shocked director pleads for mercy, crying and promising that the child Duke is looking for is among the 4 children present. Duke realizes there are 4 children instead of the expected 5. He glares at the director, accusing her of hiding a child. The director, frightened, trembles as Duke draws his sword and holds it near her throat, demanding to know where the hidden child is. Duke warns that if she dares to lie, she will die where she stands. Ellie takes care of Damien, thinking about the noise outside and realizing that Duke Schutz must be on his way. Despite her desire for the story's events to come true, she feels a little sad. Nevertheless, Ellie believes it's the best outcome for Damien. Emotionally, Ellie holds Damien's hand and reassures him that it won't hurt anymore. Damien, confused, questions Ellie, who reminds him of her promise to help him reunite with his family. At that moment, Duke enters the room. Damien, thinking about Duke, wonders if he is the family Ellie was referring to. Auntie, observing Duke's emotional behavior, gulps and reflects on how he hasn't seen him act this way since his wife passed away. Aunt didn't expect to witness Duke behaving in such an emotional manner again. Duke stands near Damien's bed, thinking that Damien, despite being described as a young boy, appears quite scrawny. While observing Ellie, Duke recognizes her as the girl he ran into earlier. Damien notices Duke looking at Ellie, prompting him to stand up before the Duke. Ellie warns Damien not to stand, but an angry Damien, staggering, confronts Duke, warning him not to look at Ellie that way and threatening to make him pay if he hurts her. Duke smirks, thinking Damien is acting fierce for a pipsqueak. Duke questions Damien's ability to protect anyone when he can't even stand straight. Duke observes the shining stone and realizes it's his friend's son. Damien, staggering, collapses and loses consciousness. Ellie panics, desperately trying to wake Damien up. Duke kneels and reassures Ellie that Damien is reabsorbing the taken mana, which will aid in building up strength. He then places the mana stone in Damien's hand. Ellie notes that Damien's fever has indeed gone down. Duke then requests an explanation from the teachers about why Damien looks so unwell, delivering a threat to cut their tongues off and kill them if the explanation is unsatisfactory. The teachers tremble in response. A frightened teacher expresses the intention to gather adoption documents and summon the director. Meanwhile, Ellie reflects on Duke Schutz's intimidating presence, acknowledging him as described in the book and feeling a sense of awe. Ellie gulps nervously and shares with Duke Schutz that his intimidating demeanor scares people more than a phantom would. He suggests that Duke could try softening his expression, noting the effect it had on the teachers, who promptly ran off. Ant points out to Duke Schutz that his intimidating appearance might have contributed to Duke Clyder's son fainting. Duke, however, dismisses the idea, suggesting the boy was simply feeling sick. Ant continues to emphasize the intimidating aspect of Duke's demeanor, expressing doubt about the young lord being thrilled at the prospect of adoption. Duke, ignoring Ant, goes to Ellie and asks if Damien is asleep. Ant is surprised by Duke's concern for the sick child. Duke, noticing Damien on the floor, he lifts Damien from the floor, instructs Ant to fetch a facecloth, and gently places Damien on the bed. Ellie offers to handle the rest. Duke observes Ellie caring for Damien. He questions her, mentioning that it's his first time in the region, and asks how she knew about the child he was searching for. Ellie, feeling fear, freezes, realizing she needs to answer carefully as Duke is testing her. Ellie, feeling the pressure, contemplates the consequences of making a mistake and ending up like she did in the story. Despite the fear, she recognizes that honesty is crucial. Determined, she prepares to share the truth with Duke. Ellie admits that she was aware of Duke's search for a child, revealing that the director instructed her to inform him about the presence of children with black hair and blue eyes. Duke, perceptive, questions her motive for specifying the number of children, prompting Ellie to pause in response. Duke maintains a scrutinizing gaze on Ellie. Nervously, Ellie contemplates her situation, torn between the fear of being suspected if Duke discovers her intentional approach and the realization that lying might not escape his perceptive scrutiny. In a fearful tone, Ellie admits that she suspected Damien could be the child Duke was searching for due to his black hair and blue eyes. When questioned by Duke about why she didn't guide him directly to Damien, Ellie reveals her intention to make him witness the conditions of the entire orphanage, the conditions the children endured. Anne enters, listening to Ellie and Duke's conversation. Ellie reveals the neglectful behavior of the teachers, explaining that they do all the work while the teachers leave for the casino at night. Her intention was for Duke to witness the dire situation firsthand. Duke, having asked for her name and Damien's, acknowledges the information. The apprehensive director enters the room upon hearing that Duke is looking for her. Casting an angry glance at Ellie, she wonders if the young girl has revealed any information. Duke, however, calmly declares his intention to adopt the boy, referring to Damien, and expresses his decision to take the girl, Ellie, as well. The director is left startled and questioning Duke's unexpected decisions. Annie questions Duke about adopting Ellie, to which Duke responds that Ellie will be his daughter-in-law. Startled, Ellie contemplates the unexpected turn of events, conflicted by the deviation from the anticipated storyline, where Damien is supposed to end up with Ashabel, the female lead. Ellie looks at Damien, who is holding her hand in his sleep. Damien mumbles not to leave, and Ellie, contemplating their bond, admits that she's already attached to him. The thought of not having to part ways makes her happy. The director, shouting, insists that Duke cannot take Ellie, emphasizing her disapproval by calling Ellie a lowly brat. In her desperation to prevent Duke from adopting Ellie, the director reveals that Ellie's mother was the thief who stole from Count Lational, marking Ellie as the daughter of a criminal. The director is determined to stop this adoption at any cost. In the midst of war, an audacious thief disrupted the empire by successfully pilfering the emperor's prized possession from the heavily guarded imperial palace. Despite a massive manhunt, the thief eluded capture. However, fate took a different turn, and she was eventually apprehended at Count Lational's residence. Anne reflects on the grim end of the tale, having heard that the thief was executed on the spot, unaware that she had a daughter. The director, with a hesitant smile, attempts to dissuade Duke from adopting Ellie, citing concerns about potential damage to his reputation. Duke, unmoved by the director's pleas, expresses his frustration, questioning how much longer he must endure such nonsense. Unperturbed, the director stammers in shock at Duke's dismissive response. Auntie, following Duke's command, prepares to escort the director away from the scene. Duke, kneeling in front of Ellie, entrusts the decision to her. Ellie, in turn, presents her condition: the dismissal of all the teachers at the orphanage. The director, startled by Ellie's demand, expresses discontent and questions the basis for such a request. Anne reflects on Ellie's boldness and acknowledges her unique demeanor. Ellie, in a calm but determined manner, proposes terms to Duke, emphasizing the need to address the mistreatment of the other children in the orphanage. Duke, agreeing to Ellie's request, acknowledges her plea for a positive change in the orphanage's environment. Duke issues a command for Anne to strip the teachers of their credentials, signaling a change in the orphanage staff. The director protests vehemently, expressing distrust and anger towards Ellie, but her pleas fall on deaf ears. Anne proceeds to take the director away in compliance with Duke's orders. Ellie, bewildered by the swift actions Duke took, didn't anticipate the immediate changes to the orphanage. Duke assures her that the orphanage will transform according to her wishes. However, Ellie is left pondering Duke's motives, uncertain why he wants her to accompany him. Despite the uncertainty, she finds solace in the resolution of the situation. Grateful that everything worked out, especially for Damien's sake, she decides to stay with him until he encounters the female lead and experiences love, ultimately agreeing to go with Duke. As they reach the carriage, Duke instructs the banishment of the director and teachers to a specified location on the map. He declares that people from the Schutz family will manage the orphanage temporarily until a new director is appointed. Duke ensures the provision of an adequate number of teachers for the institution. Grateful for the changes, Ellie stands with her suitcase, bowing to Duke and expressing her thanks. Elated, Ellie gazes towards the orphanage, thinking about how the children will finally have a chance to live comfortably. Meanwhile, Duke ponders the unusual smoothness of the situation, considering the possibility that Ellie might be one of the Emperor's spies. He questions her motives, especially why she proposed her own conditions instead of immediately agreeing to go with him. Additionally, he notes her genuine happiness about the positive changes in the orphanage. Duke takes out his cigar, contemplating the recent events. He acknowledges that he's not in a position to criticize having accepted Ellie's absurd conditions. However, memories of a girl who once told him, "I can solve the problem troubling you, Your Grace. I have but one condition. Please marry me," resurface in his mind. Betty, with an emotional demeanor, rushes towards Ellie and embraces her tightly. Ellie, surprised to see Betty, calls her by name. Betty, with a sniffle, expresses her concern, fearing that she won't see Ellie again after she leaves, citing the absence of other kids who departed. Ellie reassures Betty, telling her not to worry and promises to return for visits. Betty, seeking confirmation, asks if Ellie can guarantee her return, to which Ellie confidently responds with a sincere promise. After Duke departs, he stands alone, beginning to enjoy his cigar. In solitude, he mutters dismissively about the futility of glaring, implying that mere looks can't be lethal, and suggests that Damien might be more threatening if armed with a sword. Damien, who had been observing Duke from behind a tree, is startled by his sudden awareness. Frustrated and confused, Damien voices his lack of understanding, questioning Duke's motives in adopting him and taking Ellie, seeking clarity on Duke's intentions. Duke, while enjoying his cigar, declares his intention to provide Damien with training in rhetoric upon their return to the duchy. Damien, persistently seeking answers, questions Duke about why he is taking both him and Ellie. Duke clarifies that he is not taking them but returning Damien to where he belongs. He asserts that Damien is currently akin to a feral animal, but once back in his rightful place, he will gain a new perspective, strength, and resolve. Duke believes this transformation will enable Damien to protect those he cares about. Damien, feeling frustrated, contemplates the intimidating nature of adults and the difficulty in trusting them. He expresses a reluctance to go with Duke. However, he acknowledges that if Duke resembles his former master, Ellie might have been in danger while he was unconscious. Damien regrets his perceived weakness in not being able to protect Ellie. Damien recalls a moment just a short while ago when Ellie insisted that he must go back to where he belongs. He questions Ellie about her decision to come with him, and Ellie reassures him by reminding him of her promise to stay by his side. Duke's words echo in Damien's mind as he contemplates the idea of returning to his rightful place and gaining the strength to protect those he cares about. Angry, Damien yells at Duke, expressing his concern about Ellie. Duke reassures Damien that he has no intention of making Ellie work and dismisses the notion. Despite Duke's assurance, Damien glares at him, vowing to retaliate if Ellie is mistreated, and then exits the scene. Duke clicks his tongue, noting Damien's resemblance to his father. Reflecting on Duke Clyder's nature, he observes that despite being warm and affectionate with his wife, his demeanor would shift in the company of others. Duke recognizes these traits in Damien, acknowledging him as a true Clyder by every action he takes. Ellie and Damien sit together in the carriage, both eventually succumbing to sleep along the journey. Damien rests his head on Ellie's shoulder as they doze off. Ellie, waking up with a yawn, thinks about how both of them managed to fall asleep. She notices that Damien seems to be feeling better now, bringing her a sense of relief. Ellie hears a crow's caw, prompting her to look outside the carriage. As she observes the surroundings, she realizes they are now in the northern region. The eerie atmosphere makes her anxious, especially considering the reputation of this territory being infested with monsters. Trying to stay brave, Ellie murmurs to herself that she must maintain a courageous demeanor. A crow tapping on the carriage window startles Ellie, causing her to flinch. Filled with fear, she wonders if the crow somehow comprehended her earlier words, convinced that it was staring at her. Despite the impossibility, her anxious thoughts persist. The carriage driver announces their arrival, prompting Ellie to gently guide the sleeping Damien with her hand as they enter the palace. Overwhelmed by the grandeur of the palace, Ellie notices the presence of crows and expresses her surprise. A butler named Franz welcomes them, informing Duke that they received word about Lord Damien's arrival. Duke acknowledges the information. Duke realizes he forgot a crucial detail and informs butler Franz about bringing another child as his future daughter-in-law. Franz expresses surprise and seeks clarification. Ellie, overhearing this, reflects on how describing her as a mere detail seemed like an understatement and recalls her initial shock upon hearing Duke's plan. Speechless, Franz pleads for an explanation with his eyes, expressing his confusion. Aunt casually responds that it's just how things turned out. Franz sighs, suggesting that Aunt should have intervened to prevent Duke's surprising decision. Nervous, Ellie reflects on her past expectations of being welcomed by her new family and acknowledges her younger self's excitement. However, she now recognizes her folly and expresses a desire to focus on preparing for the future without needing a warm and accepting family. She feels confident in being able to brush off whatever comments or reactions may come her way. Franz expresses concern about the lack of a suitable maid to serve the young lady. Ellie flinches, contemplating the unexpected mention of being referred to as a young lady and the notion of having a maid. Ellie insists that she'll manage on her own, emphasizing her self-reliance from doing chores alone at the orphanage. In her thoughts, she expresses a desire not to be perceived as an annoying, needy kid. Duke instructs Franz to address the matter promptly. A maid whispers something in Anne's ear, leading him to inform Duke about the arrival of vassals and distant relatives. Duke expresses mild frustration at the spread of rumors in his absence and instructs Anne to inform the visitors that he'll meet them after resting. He then asks Franz to guide the children to their rooms. Guided by Franz, Ellie and Damien are led through the grandeur of the palace. As they move forward, Ellie contemplates the potential threats posed by vassals and distant relatives to Damien. Despite Duke Schutz officially adopting Damien, Ellie realizes that it will take time for others to comprehend the depth of their bond. With determination, she resolves not to let anything harmful happen to Damien, determined to shield him from any trials and tribulations that may lie ahead. Viscount Corbineau expresses frustration, questioning the legitimacy of Duke Schutz's claim to have found the Clyder child. He suspects it might be a trick involving a smuggled mana stone. Corbineau believes that House Clyder's vassals and distant relatives aim to reclaim control of the Merchant Guild, especially with the Clyder child now under Duke Schutz's care. Corbineau advocates for taking action to prevent a return to the previous state, emphasizing the long-standing involvement of House Schutz in managing the Merchant Guild for over 11 years. Amidst the discussions, another man acknowledges the challenge of opposing Duke Schutz, expressing agreement with Viscount Corbineau's frustration. Corbineau, frustrated himself, contemplates the apparent lack of understanding from those who may not grasp the gravity of the situation. He believes that their failure to recognize the imminent threat may lead to severe consequences. Duke strides into the room, visibly annoyed by the ongoing discussions. Viscount Corbineau greets him with a forced cheeriness, acknowledging the Duke's arrival. Duke fixes a stern glare on Corbineau, cutting through the discussions with an air of authority. He proceeds to confirm the truth that he has indeed located Duke Clyder's son. Amidst hesitation, a man acknowledges the discovery of Duke Clyder's son and learns that the child's name is Damien. He recognizes the significance of the name, tying Damien to the rightful position as the head of House Clyder. Duke contemplates the shamelessness of those who would pit him and Damien against each other, recognizing the potential danger from both sides. Those who may harm the young Damien to secure the Clyder family name and the vassals and relatives of House Clyder who might act similarly. Duke expresses that Damien has made a valuable friend, considering Ellie's potential usefulness to the family. He plans to instruct both of them, intending for Damien and Ellie to become his official successors. Corbineau is taken aback as Duke emphasizes his commitment to ensuring that Damien and Ellie can carry on the Clyder name with utmost prestige, sparing no effort in this endeavor. Corbineau expresses shock and disbelief at Duke's words, while another person questions the absurdity of such a plan. Duke asserts his decision to adopt Damien and ensure that Ellie remains under his care, with the intention of arranging their marriage when the time is right. The members present are left in a state of shock, contemplating the unexpected proposal of marriage. Upon completing the betrothal rites, regardless of age, an individual gains official recognition as a member of the family. Duke Schutz's plan to arrange Damien's marriage to a chosen child would result in the formal transfer of power over the Clyder Merchant Guild. Striking Duke contemplated, determined not to allow Duke Clyder's son to be cast out or married off to someone else by those who sought to benefit from the situation. Duke sought the blessing of those in attendance, reminding them of their sworn loyalty to his noble family. The room fell silent as members contemplated his decision. Frustrated, Corbineau considered the situation, realizing that Duke Schutz's actions went beyond his expectations, particularly in selecting a future wife for Damien. He acknowledged the need for a new plan. Ellie, upon entering her room, was astounded. The chandelier, resembling gemstones, caught her attention, sparking a desire to test its authenticity. She turned around, calling for Damien, only to learn that he was currently occupied with the butler. Perplexed, Ellie couldn't help but express her surprise. Royna, the maid, introduced herself, expressing their commitment to ensuring Ellie's comfort during her stay. She bowed gracefully, emphasizing their dedication to serving. Ellie, feeling nervous, reciprocated the gesture and tentatively greeted Royna. The maid reassured Ellie that formality was unnecessary, prompting Ellie to question if it was truly acceptable. Lost in thought, Ellie pondered the unusual experience of having adults serve her, noting their politeness and feeling a sense of unfamiliarity with the situation. Royna smiled, expressing confidence that Ellie would adjust to the situation. She then instructed the other maids to introduce themselves to Ellie. Ivana May and Eshelle greeted Ellie warmly, assuring her that she could use any name she preferred. Ellie, while thinking that it wasn't that difficult to remember names, graciously thanked them for their hospitality and efforts. The maids were impressed by Ellie's kindness, expressing their thoughts in amazement. Meanwhile, Ellie, feeling a bit confused, wondered if they perceived her differently than Damien due to their considerate looks. Royna, after the introductions, guided Ellie, acknowledging the exhaustion from her journey and offering to take care of her bath. Ellie, taken aback, couldn't believe the suggestion of being bathed by the maids. In the bathroom, the maids began brushing Ellie's hair and assisting her. However, Ellie, annoyed by the situation, contemplated the dilemma of revealing her malnourished state. Despite her initial hesitation, she decided to get accustomed to the situation to avoid any negative perceptions. Determined, Ellie embraced the moment. Behind her, Ashell couldn't contain a laugh, prompting a quick apology from Royna, who explained that Ellie's cuteness was the cause. Ashell inquired about Ellie's preference for scented oils, but Ellie, unfamiliar with the concept, expressed contentment with warm water. She reminisced about the cold water in the orphanage, causing a somber reaction among all the maids. Observing their saddened expressions, Ellie wondered if her honesty had been a mistake and if she should have been more careful with her words. Royna assured Ellie that they would make an effort to find a scented oil she liked. Ellie, expressing gratitude, promised not to be a bother. However, Royna playfully rephrased it, emphasizing their commitment to serving Ellie until she felt comfortable bothering them. This left Ellie confused. As Ellie relaxed on her bed that night, she reflected on the assistance she received, acknowledging that it took longer than bathing alone. However, the luxury of using ample hot water and scented oils made the experience enjoyable. She reveled in the feeling of refreshment, expressing a reluctance to leave such comfort. Ellie, pleased and rolling on her bed, accidentally bumps into Damien, causing both of them to jolt. Concerned, she asks Damien if something is wrong. Damien, stammering, assures her that nothing happened. He was just taken aback. Meanwhile, Ellie, in her thoughts, notices Damien's new haircut and expresses her surprise and delight. Playfully poking Damien's cheek, Ellie thinks that he must be feeling self-conscious about his new haircut. Meanwhile, Damien, lost in his thoughts, acknowledges Ellie's enhanced beauty since the last time he saw her, causing his heart to beat rapidly. Ellie asks Damien if the butler mentioned anything to him today. Damien, confused, inquires about the details. Whispering in Damien's ear, Ellie reveals Royna's statement about them getting married. This revelation startles Damien, prompting Ellie to explain that marriage involves a promise to love only one person for life. Damien, puzzled, expresses confusion about the concept of love. Ellie contemplates how to explain the concept of love, realizing it's challenging. Attempting to describe it, she mentions the tingling sensation, feverish feeling, and a fast-beating heart. Damien, blushing, reacts to this description, leading him to ponder whether he might be in love with Ellie. Ellie, still contemplating the difficulty of explaining love, notices Damien starting to hiccup. Concerned, she asks what's wrong, and Damien, startled, explains the hiccups. Ellie suggests pinching his nose to cure them. In her thoughts, Ellie considers Damien's shock at the news of their impending marriage as a reasonable cause for his reaction. Ellie reflects on her initial intention to help Damien find his family without expecting to become a part of it. She asks Damien if he's feeling better. In her thoughts, Ellie expresses concern that others might misconstrue her motives, thinking she planned to benefit from Damien's wealth and background. To lighten the mood, she playfully pinches Damien's cheek. Playfully poking Damien's cheek, Ellie teases him about the possibility of hiccups, noticing his reddened face. In her thoughts, she reflects on the need for everyone to understand their roles. Ellie questions Damien if he feels achy due to tiredness. Meanwhile, Ellie contemplates her uncertain position as the daughter of a thief and acknowledges the unpredictable future. Damien, rubbing Ellie's hand on his cheek, attributes his warmth to feeling a little hot. In her thoughts, Ellie emphasizes the importance of playing it safe in her current situation. Ellie suggests moving over a bit on the bed since Damien mentioned feeling hot, but he reacts with shock, urging her not to go. Confused, Ellie questions Damien's response and he hesitates, fidgeting. Ellie then realizes Damien's concern about having another nightmare in the unfamiliar surroundings, to which Damien confirms, expressing his fear of the new place. Reflecting on her expectations from the book, Ellie acknowledges that Damien's adjustment to the Duke's castle is different in reality. However, she accepts the situation and decides to offer comfort. Ellie holds on to Damien while sleeping, suggesting that this way he won't feel scared, even if it's hot. Damien, finding comfort, sleeps with his arms around Ellie. Ellie, in her thoughts, finds Damien even cuter in this moment. She smiles and instructs Damien to close his eyes, assuring him it's time to sleep. Ellie wishes Damien a good night's sleep. In her thoughts, Ellie reflects on the events of the day and Damien's challenging life. She expresses her hope that despite his hardships, Damien will find greater happiness in the future. Ellie wishes for his dreams to be filled with twinkling galaxies as he sleeps tonight and in the nights to come.